Welcome to another episode of Parenting Teens Advice Redefined, where we have the real, raw conversations to help you raise just not kids into the world, but these amazing human beings. And today's conversation is for parents who are watching their teens work hard, feel overwhelmed, and still fall short, and who are being told the answer is more grit, more mindset, more accommodations. My guest, Richard Comeau, the founder of Above the Maze, sees something different. He helps students who aren't failing because they don't care, but because the system was never built to let them actually learn. This is a conversation about what's really breaking down, why well-intentioned support often makes it worse, and what it looks like when we finally design learning that works with the student's brain instead of against it. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, and thank you for having me.
Now, I'm happy to have you, and in getting to know you, I know that your business actually just bridges a gap that is so necessary, and I'm excited to share this with the audience. And I just want to start with, what's your why? What's the point of all doing this?
Because I think that, I think you mentioned it, just in what you said right there, right? Is that this focus on mindset and grit is really solving the wrong problem. Mm. And solving the wrong problem for these kids is not just a waste of time. It's actually, it's actually emotionally and, energetically damaging. And it really, really destroys motivation. Because these kids are internalizing a struggle of trying to navigate a system that just does not fit their brains. And there's nothing wrong with their brains. It's just the system itself doesn't have anything to do with the way we really learn.
Yeah, 100%. And so let's start from the beginning. Your kid now has this diagnosis. And I find that some parents get the booklet pages from psychology jargon about what this actually means and recommendations. But there is that gap between, okay, here's your label. So maybe this makes sense in a regular, antiquated education system. But what can it mean when we have this diagnosis?
I think what's really important is, beyond the diagnosis and beyond, the psychoeducational assessments, I think what they do is they explain what you can observe, right? But I think we need to start with what you can observe, right? What happens for a kid who's sitting down in front of work and shutting down? Why are they shutting down? What's going on with trying to take in that information? And I think that that's where the assessments can be useful. Oh, okay, well, they're shutting down because there's way too much information for them to visually discriminate. And there's actually way too much on the page, too much clutter, and they don't even know where their eyes are supposed to settle. Mm-hmm. Okay, so knowing that, what would that kid need in order not to have that experience? And I think that that is really what we're trying to think about right now, is how can we shape the experience so that it facilitates access versus just creates unnecessary barriers because of the way that we've just chosen to keep teaching these kids.
Okay, well, you know what, Richard? Here's the IP. Here's the 17,000 accommodations. What's the problem? It says break it down. It says do this. It says do that. What's the issue?
Well, a lot of the problem is that they don't change the state of the person into feeling like, I can do this. I know what's happening right now, right? And so they end up basically trying to get them to reorganize bits of information that don't make sense to them, right? How can you break down and parse out what you can't make sense of, right? And why should you even care? And that's the problem, right? Is that when we're talking about university students and they're sitting in a class, the professor has an idea of what this information is. Mm-hmm. Right? And why this information makes sense and why you need to know it. But the way that they convey that information through lecture slides or long unidirectional lectures, right? It's it really is up to the student to try to make sense of what's in the professor's head from material that doesn't actually point to it, right? And so there's so much of an inference burden and a meaning-making burden that's placed on students. And when you can't make meaning and you've got ADHD or executive function challenges, you can't make meaning, your brain is off, right? And so a lot of these kids are navigating school with their brains off and internalizing that as, they can't learn.
As opposed to, they're just totally disengaging. They're just lazy. They just don't want to do it.
Well, I think that there's something that actually, I call, I'm not sure if it's an official term or not, but it makes sense to me, sequential disengagement, right? So what this means is that a student will make an attempt to do something and then face a barrier that they don't know how to get through. And then they'll try something else and face another barrier and face another barrier. And soon it's actually just a good idea not to keep engaging. It's a good idea not to go to your classes because you're sitting there feeling bad about yourself that you can't understand anything that's going on, right? And so I think a lot of these problems are being solved really downstream. They're trying to, focus on schedules and, routines and what time do you have to set your alarm to go to class and, like all that kind of stuff, right? It's like, how is going to class meaningful, right? When you're sitting there just going, I don't get this, right?
Yeah. And it becomes, I feel like the words common denominator come to, well, we tried this and they couldn't learn, and we tried this and they couldn't learn, they tried this. So now the kid's going, it's got to be me. Yeah. And so now it's self-preservation. I'm not even opening up my freaking laptop.
Exactly. Right. And that's the thing is that, the way the brain actually takes in information is about active sense making in a very short amount of time. You only have a really short amount of time to hold on to information before it's completely lost. But the way that information is actually presented always exceeds that amount of time for sense making. So it's always up to the student to hold on to all this information, hold on to partial understanding, and they're never getting that sense of really understanding what's going on. Some students can sit there and take notes or really, they do understand what's going on because they were able to do the pre-reading and that kind of thing. They did the background information so they could sit in class. Many students can't, right? And these students that can't end up just avoiding everything that looks anything that isn't assessed.
Yeah. And when you say can't, I've said this so many times in the podcast, it's not won't, it's can't. Yeah. And that is that it, I hear somebody say, oh, they don't want to, they won't try, they won't put an effort in. Nobody wants to, won't. Kids can and do, or kids will when they can. Is my point. Everybody, we all do well when we can.
Exactly.
So this really translates into, it's not a won't, it's a can't. Don't have the ability. So, you can be very clear and say, well, they won't walk. They're in a wheelchair, but they won't walk. Like, what's the problem? Come on. That's really clear and really stark, but it also applies to these invisible disabilities that we can't see and we can't understand. And so here's all the accommodations. So if more help, more accommodations isn't the answer, what is the answer?
I think providing access and providing meaning, turning on the brain with engagement, right? And when the school is not able to do that themselves, I'll share something really briefly here on my screen for the people that can see it. I'll read it for the people that can't. But, I just want to show some lecture slides here of what, typical, what students are typically given. Now, are you able to see that?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right?
Yep.
So here we've got, a bunch of learning objectives. Explain how to account for current liabilities. This is an accounting course. Explain how to account for bonds. Explain how to account for the issuance of common and preferred stock. So these are learning objectives, but why does this matter? Like, how is this even relevant or meaningful to me? What are current liabilities? What does this even mean? Mm-hmm. Right? And then the actual information is usually a bit of a paste dump, right? It's like financing operations. Businesses might finance operations through one of two ways. Debt financing includes all liabilities owned by a business. Equity financing, investments from owners of a business. Stock is issued to represent ownership interest in a corporation. Blah, 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 right? Like, yes. What does that actually mean? How can I sink my teeth into that at all, right? And that's the very first slide. Mm-hmm. Now, not really making sense of that, right? Not properly encoding that. Now I have to continue going through this, right? And basically just feeling like, I don't get this, I don't get this, I don't get this. And there's nothing not gettable about this information. It's just the way that it's presented has nothing to do with why it's meaningful. What's in the professor's understanding in terms of their real world application of this, like why this actually matters, right? None of that is transmitted through the way that students are taught. Mm. And so they have to make all this meaning up themselves out of stuff that like bores them to the point of like pain. Mm-hmm. Right? So their brains are off. Their thinking, planning, problem solving brains are completely off. Yeah. And they have to make sense of this information, right? So the very first thing that I would do with a student like this is just basically say, okay, well, let's turn this into something that's way, way, way more digestible, mm-hmm. right? And to do that, I'm going to share my other screen here. I'm going to do this.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are really trying to do something important here, cut through all the jargon to understand the two pillars of how a company funds itself. We're talking debt versus equity. We've gone through your sources on reporting and analyzing liabilities and shareholders' equity. And the mission today is, well, it's clarity. For every single transaction, we're going to ask one simple question. Does the company owe someone, which is a liability, or does someone own part of the company, and that's equity? If you can keep that one distinction clear, the whole balance sheet just opens up. Okay, let's unpack this. And let's start with the money a company owes, the obligations.
Yeah, that's absolutely the right place to begin. A liability isn't just, some abstract number. It's a real commitment. It means the company got a benefit but hasn't paid for it yet.
So there's an obligation.
Oh, hey, our listener wants to join in. What's up?
What do you mean they got a benefit and haven't paid for it yet? I don't get that.
That is a great question.
Thank you for jumping in.
Okay, let's unpack this with a concrete example.
Imagine you go to a hardware store.
And you buy $1,000 of wood.
But you use your store credit card.
So you have the wood right now.
That's the benefit the company gave you.
They gave you the asset, the inventory.
But they haven't gotten the cash yet.
They are obligated to pay later.
So that unpaid bill is a liability.
It's a real commitment to pay up later.
Exactly. An obligation to pay or to perform a service.
We'll talk about performing service soon.
But the first big question is always about time.
So the idea here with this is that we can turn learning into something that's immediately accessible for sense making by providing a context for it, right? Once we provide a context for it, all of a sudden, all the elements within that context have a place to sit in the brain. There's shelves now for the information in the brain, right? And so when information comes in, it's no longer just falling on the floor, gets swept up by that little janitor that comes along to get rid of everything that doesn't make any sense, right? Which for students who struggle in school is almost all the information, right? But here we have a context. And I think the other important thing that I think that I was trying to demonstrate there was that it's this capacity to hold on to partial understanding and get feedback on it that really helps hone meaning making.
Yeah.
right? Because when we are trying to understand something, we have a way that we kind of understand it, and we need clarification on that. But if I'm going through a medium of trying to learn and I can't get any clarification on my partial understanding, I can't hold on to my partial understanding.
So for those who are only listening, what did you just do there? They didn't see what you just did. They didn't see what screen popped up.
Yeah, so I get students, I mean, the first thing I do is I get them to take their lecture slides and turn it into a way that basically they can get the information into their brain, okay? And if you are a person that really struggles with walls of text, but audio is a strength, then converting it into a podcast is really helpful, right? But I think not only converting it into a podcast, converting it into a primer, right? So it's you don't just take the information and say, okay, make a podcast out of this. You take the information and you say, what is it that as a student I need to be aware of with this information? What is the professor's intention for me to understand this information, right? And so I think that when we're looking at trying to develop tools that actually really activate engagement, it's not that we're just taking static text, walls of text and stuff like that, and translating it into like something that reads it out loud. We're looking at what can we do to actually think about what the student's struggle is with that information, right? And so there are really important questions that I try to focus on answering. And there's three main ones, basically. What do I need to know or know how to do? How do I know that I know it? How do I know that I can do it?
That's good.
Right? And what's the best way for this information to get into my brain? Right? And if you are on top of every week, you take your information and you turn it into those three questions, when you have tests, you're going to do so much better on them because you're actually going to have learned the information. You're going to have sense made the information.
So, Richard, I think that the elephant in the room is that AI?
That's AI, right?
The evil AI that we have to avoid and be afraid of?
It's kind of crazy because the way that we look at AI is completely backwards, right? AI is a world builder. And basically what it does is it allows us access to externalize things that we need for sense making that we cannot make sense of without that externalization, right? So in other words, what it just externalized there was a bunch of context for why this information made sense. I cannot externalize that myself, or I cannot come up with that myself because I can't make sense of the information in the first place. So how am I going to understand how it makes sense, right? And so if you kind of think about the principles of video games, why do kids with ADHD, neurodiversity gravitate so much to video games? It's because they work exactly the way their brain needs things to work, right?
Oh, interesting.
I make an attempt, I get immediate feedback. The feedback is not didactic, it's intrinsic to the actual game itself, right? So I know that if I have, I'm trying to make a jump in a video game, I know if I've missed or not right away. Doesn't have to, right? Yes. And it's not delayed, right? And in order for me to understand that what I'm trying to do is make that jump, the assets need to be there for me to act within that environment. So good video games and good principles of learning are where we take we externalize the assets for the student so that the decision making is actually the point of the learning, and they can make that decision because they've been provided with the context that decision makes sense in. And that's how I test whether or not I understand something. Can I make a decision based on it? Can I solve a problem on it?
Mhm.
Right? That's how I'm going to make sense of this information. So this podcast thing that I'm doing right now and showing you right now is just the first layer of getting information into your brain,
Mhm.
right? But then the other layer here is that, I'll make simulations for students. And, this is one example of one right here. I can play this out loud and show it on my screen. Get this to read it out loud.
Open quote. The setting, Riverton Metalworks. You are sitting alone in the accounting office at Riverton Metalworks, a custom fabrication shop that runs on thin margins and tighter timing. It is 4:55 p.m. on the last day of the month. The shop floor has gone quiet, but the pressure has not. The crisis. A lender is waiting on the finalized balance sheet to release payroll funding for next week. If the current liabilities are wrong, the ratios fail. If the ratios fail, the funding stalls. If the funding stalls, payroll does not clear. Your hands are on the keyboard. There is no one else to pass this to. Ready to continue? Close quote. The reality Sarah from accounts receivable rushes in without knocking. She drops a single-page printout on your desk. You can see the code in our conversation history. She does not sit down. I just finished posting today's cash sales, so the bank balance ties out. She hesitates, then adds, do you want to see how I booked it?
So what someone listening won't see is that there's actually been an output of stuff for the student to look at on that screen that she's talking about.
The conflict. Sarah slides her laptop forward and points to the entry she just posted. You can see the code in our conversation history. She looks up, already defending it. I mean, that's what we received. The cash is real. And the sale happened today, so it has to be revenue, right? She waits a beat, then asks quietly, how do I fix this?
Right. And so what's happening here is that the student is immersed in active sense making in the context of a real world situation. They're immersed in a game, what we would call a serious game.
Yeah. So for those who aren't seeing this, are these the prompts you're putting into AI?
Yes. So what I do is I build these simulation engines based on the student's material, right? Mm. But I mean, it depends. Again, it depends on what's going to be useful for the student in that particular, like for that student's particular learning flow. Mm-hmm. What I would do is I would look at how is the material being presented? What blocks does the student have based on how the material is being presented? What experience would they have to have of working with this material in order to get in that place of active meaning making? Mm-hmm. And then that just becomes part of their workflow for every week. It becomes something that like a routine. So they engage regularly and can engage regularly and actually have more desire to engage regularly, because when they're sitting down and doing something, it's always going somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a story. It's a game. It's a story. Like storytelling is the most effective way of communicating and learning. It all, like you said, it all makes sense. You're meeting them where they're at and you're taking the journey together. I love that. You talk about play space and threat space, and I feel like this is a perfect segue. Can you talk about that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that as well. I think that the threat space is normally the space that the student exists in, right? Because the materials are presented the way that they're presented, and there's no possibility for holding on to that partial understanding, students move into this space of, I need to understand this right away or I'm never going to get it. Mm-hmm. And yet anything that's worth understanding and the way that we understand things is working through confusion. Mm-hmm. But in the threat space, confusion actually just confirms I suck at learning, mm-hmm. right? And it's devastating for these students because the first sign of uncertainty or overwhelm or whatever, rather than being the point of entry for problem solving, is the confirmation of shame. It's the confirmation of I can't do this. Mm-hmm. And previously, I believe before AI, it's not that they couldn't do this, but there was absolutely no access to be able to do this. Right? And what we need to be looking at with AI, there's a fancy word here, affordances, right? What are the affordances of AI that allow us to actually turn that threat space into a play space? And a play space is what I call, it's a magic circle. It's a game. And in a game, I'm not expected to get everything right away. And if I did get it right away, it would be boring.
Yeah.
So what does a game have? Well, it has the things that I need in order to play the game. And it doesn't have a learning objective. It has a win objective. I play the game because I'm trying to accomplish something. And I'm moving the pieces around the game because I know what I'm trying to accomplish. So it means I know how to move these pieces, or I'm getting feedback on what happens when I move these pieces in the way that I maybe shouldn't be moving them. But it's not something that gets internalized as I can't learn, because it's a feedback system and I can make another attempt. That the play space is that space where we immerse in the idea that it's okay to not know. It's fun to not know.
Absolutely. And that's where I think you talk about this, like the traction comes in, where we're picking up momentum and traction on these little bits and pieces, just by the right like those 3 questions are sticking in my head. Like, why do I even need to know this? How am I going to know I know this? It's so good. Like, that's amazing. And that should be, instead of the SMART goals we see sometimes, that should be the SMART goal. Like, that's it. Yeah, I think that's just like, get rid of all this jargon and just put what the kid actually needs to know and why, and how do they know it.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And I think, and another critical question with that is, how do I know I don't know this? Right? Because I'm so used to not learning that I've compensated for my experience of learning.
Yeah.
I've translated learning into, I can recall information from a flashcard. Right? So it's like when I'm being tested, because I don't have any robust knowledge of that information, I'm waiting on a specific retrieval cue that never comes. Right? So I'm sitting there playing bingo and the only number on my thing is 068. Right? And 068's not, and once there's 068, yeah, I can fill the card or whatever, right? But it's not coming, right? Because that's not the way you're tested. Because the translation of this material that's never really overt, but always implied and always expected, right, is that you're supposed to take this material and understand the why and what it's for and all of that in terms of the professor's idea about that.
Yeah. So subjective. Yeah. And just the freeze, once you've experienced enough of that, who the hell wants to learn? Like, who wants to be putting themselves in this situation over and over and over and over and over?
Yeah. And I think that, it's important that you mentioned freeze, because I think that the nervous system actually for struggling learners is in a constant state of anticipated dread and threat confirmation, right? So when the brain is in threat confirmation, it doesn't have access to tolerating not understanding. It doesn't have access to tolerating having to, even figure out what it is you're trying to do, right? Because it's all just a confirmation of, I'm not going to be able to do this.
Yeah.
Right. And that is the central problem that I believe is facing students, is that they show up to these things already anticipating that they're not going to be able to do it, because that's what they've learned. They've learned that they can't learn. And the nervous system is bracing against that.
So, Richard, let's just give them some more mindset skills.
I mean, it's in some ways it's kind of offensive, right? I mean, I like to say,
you did note the sarcasm there, right?
Yeah. When is the last time you went, you wrote down in a calendar, on 2:00 on Tuesday, I'm going to go to the library and feel bad about myself. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it makes so much sense that you're not able to kind of get yourself to sit in front of something that you anticipate is going to be futile.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do that. We're just hardwired we're pain avoiders.
Yeah.
Right? And as long as school remains externally inaccessible, it inherently is a pain causer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so we're trying, and the other thing is, you know, when we're talking about neurodivergence and we're talking about students with ADHD and the type of students that struggle, engagement and interest is the thing that fires up the brain.
Yeah.
Right? So when that brain is not fired up, it's not on, it doesn't have the capacity for sitting in front of a problem. It's just not the way that particular brain works.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you really design school for the ADHD brain, everyone would be excelling at whatever it is that we needed, you know, they needed to know.
Mm-hmm.
Because we'd be designing for the way that the brain actually needs to engage and take in information.
Yeah. Well, hey, there's the parent that says, oh my God, he can't sit down for 5 minutes and do math homework, but he can sit on Roblox for 150 minutes. Like, hello, that's exactly why. Immediate feedback, like they're playing the game. And you have figured out a way for learners to play the game. You have made things accessible. You have made things inclusive. You have leveled the playing field. I love this. And if parents are when parents are listening, now they're going, okay, how do I get this? What do I do? Where's this Richard guy? and how do I find him? So what's the process?
Well, right now, I mean, if you want to get in touch with me, you can go on my website. It's abovethemaze.ca. You can book an appointment. We could talk about what's going on with your kid, and I'm happy to reframe everything you've ever thought is going on. And you know, after parents have that conversation, a lot of them are just in tears because there's nothing wrong with your kid.
No.
Nothing wrong with them whatsoever. They're just lost in a system that does not and cannot activate their brains.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I work with, you know, I'm coming up as the start of the new term for university students. When I work with a kid, I will go into their courses and I will pick one course and design the learning workflow for it, the learning engine, and I'll test that with the kid and say, okay, what's it like to actually, you know, do it like this? And I'll base it on, you know, obviously having met with the kid and understanding their needs and things like that. What's it like to work with that? We tweak it, we make sure it's really running, and then they start taking over. They start being able to do this for themselves.
So they don't need you forever.
No. I work in 4 phases basically. You know, it's each phase is 2 or 3 sessions. It's quick. We don't want to create dependency.
Yeah. That's just so good. I love this. So you've got the website. Is there anything, Richard, that I didn't ask you that you really wanted to say, or something I missed?
Yeah, there is something that I wanted to say.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to do with engagement, right? And this has got to do with grit. And it's got to do with mindset and all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are 3 really critical things that sustain engagement whenever you're trying to do anything, right? A way in to the engagement, a reason to stay in that engagement, and a way to get back on track within that engagement if you're starting to not get engaged or you're starting to lose your footing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at school and you say, okay, is your kid being provided a way in? Are they being given a meaningful way in? I look at those lecture slides. Do I know what I'm supposed to know? Do I know what I'm supposed to do? What do I do with that? right? I guess I'm not going to understand that. Let's not worry about that until I'm, cramming, to learn the terms in, a week before the exam, right?
Yeah.
And when I am trying to learn this material, let's just say I have a way in. What I need to know is what's the material on the lecture slide. Okay, is there a reason to stay? How do I know that I'm taking in this information properly? What is it that I'm supposed to take in? Oh, I'm just copying the slides down. I'm just memorizing stuff I don't understand. Well, you know what? I've done that for 10 minutes and I'm done. Right?
Yeah.
And then, so it's, if you really look at what we need to be doing, it's designing for engagement. It's designing for play. It's designing for activating interest, because the same part of the brain that's engaged is the part of the brain that can think and plan and problem solve. And your kid does not lack these capacities. They just cannot access them when their brain is offline navigating school that doesn't work for them.
And what a great thing to say to your kid. There's nothing wrong here. There's just an access point we need to find.
Yeah.
If you need an access point, you got Richard. I loved it. This is so good. Richard, I'm going to put everything in the show notes so the listeners know exactly where to go. But like I said at the start, I feel like you have totally bridged that gap. You have really created an accessible way for all, not just our neurodivergent kids who are just, taking courses. I mean, we have this antiquated education system in high school where you just have to take certain courses that mean literally nothing to you. You're never going to use them. Me, accounting, when I saw that slide, I broke out in hives just thinking about it.
Right.
So this creates something that is accessible, inclusive. I love it. I think it's so important. I think we really need to be accessing this and using our powers of AI for good instead of evil. It's there. We might as well get used to it. We might as well learn how to use this stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The way I like to look at it is I think that, you once you're creating access, it's not only about creating access, it's about giving kids the capacity to understand that when they are blocked, it is because of access.
Yeah.
And so what is it that they need in order to have that access? Once they understand how to do that, then they can basically, they have this button that, I kind of look at it as if you're in a wheelchair, you can put a ramp wherever you need.
Yeah.
Right?
That's amazing. I love this conversation. I am so grateful you're here. I'm so, parents who are listening, you either have a teen, love a teen, or know somebody who has a teen, then this is, or university student, doesn't matter. Be sharing this episode, be sharing this and giving it to people who you just never know, who's sitting at home, stuck and struggling and doesn't know how to find the access point. Here's your access point. So thank you for listening to another episode of Parenting Teens Advice Redefined. We will see you next time, and so grateful you're here. Thank you for listening to another episode. I hope you loved this one as much as I did. And I just wanted to share something with you because, parenting teens is not just about managing these challenges that we talk about on all the episodes. It's also about evolving alongside them. And I'm Cheryl, and not only the host of this podcast, but I'm also the creator of Insight to Impact coaching and consulting. And I help you, moms of teens, reconnect with your true selves so you can lead with purpose. You can parent with clarity. You can create stronger, more meaningful relationships with your kids. Because here's the truth. The transformation starts with you. Together, we will break free from the stress and overwhelm. We will rediscover your power. We will create the life and the family dynamic you always dreamed of. If you're ready to start this journey, let's do it. You might just not recognize your life in the next 90 days. It all starts with a call. There's no pitch. There's no pressure. Just a call to see if I can help. We'll talk about your goals. We'll talk about what's making you feel stuck and what might be getting in your way. And everything you need to connect with me is in the show notes. Again, I'm Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me here on Parenting Teens, advice redefined for today's complex world, and the creator of Insight to Impact Coaching and Consulting. Have a great day.